graders, in the 50s, as they started to go, and even today, they point to an interest in movies and cinematography, and that's the style that developed was trying to tell more of a cinematic than almost, I want to say, stilted look we have in Western comics a lot. And here's another thing, look, during the 50s, what was going on in the Western, in the US was the Seduction of Innocence came out, and we got the comics code. And you read about what things they had to do, and it's like, no wonder comics became, so I'm using the word stilted a lot. One of the things is villains could not have any sort of sympathy for them. And they could just be maniacally evil, basically. And that sort of, and I think, anyone agree, like any good story where the villain, you kind of feel for them or understand them is a better story. All right, moving, so I want to talk about the different genres. Talking about shonen. Shonen means boy, and the comics are generally aimed at teen boys. Some magazines will be for younger, some will be for older teens, but they're very action oriented. They're very much just your standard fight stories and competitions. I mean, romantic comedies are like popular genre, but there's usually a lot of slapstick in it too. I mean, the most popular magazine, Weekly Shonen Jump. Yeah, let's see here. They sell about 3 million copies a week. And put that in perspective, in the US, 100,000 is like really big for a comic to sell. And you get these books for like what was the equivalent of $2 or $3. The saying is, in Japan, anime is really expensive, but manga is really cheap. And so that's, if you will, your main field. It takes up about 40% of the industry of what's published is shonen stories. And then shoujo, which was for girls, which was really originally a very boring kind of story stuff. They just had supposed to be like teach girls how to properly behave, and slowly more fantasy and adventure stories started to develop. The original magical girl, Sally the Witch, which was actually inspired by Bewitched. Stories about young girls who could turn themselves older and go on adventures. And then the boy love development in the 70s, and which continues today. They're about 8% of the market, which is in Japan, but like a lot bigger over here of our market. You see how much shoujo there is. Seinen, which is young men, which is then aimed at people in their 20s or older. This is a much more broad category than shonen. You have your more advanced action stories, and you have your more sexy stories, but you also get weird stories like Yotsubo, which is the story about this 5-year-old girl and just the little adventures she goes on around town. And it's cute, and it's in a young men's magazine. And seinen is actually a growing field because in Japan, they have an aging population, so they're having problems with there's fewer and fewer newer people to get into comics and then slowly age with them, which is something they used to be able to do in the 80s and 90s. You could read comics from cradle to grave. Josei is young women's comics, which is shoujo developed in the 70s. And they started aging, they started requiring a older based comics. The stereotype is sort of the office lady who reads comics on her way to work. So there's a lot, it's the equivalent of like a trashy Harlequin romance novel, a lot of stuff. But there's also more developed stuff, sports stories, and anything that could touch women's. I'm sorry. Okay, and there's also, smaller amounts of alternative manga, of just really weird stuff and stuff for kids, and super specialized magazines like all the stories are about golf, or about boxing, or something like that. Okay, we following? Questions? Comments?